Assalamu alaikum. Anybody seen this photo before? I was surprised to find this photo in a dark area of social media called Snap al-Tayyibin. Snap al-Tayyibin is a Snapchat channel that shows artifacts of the long, ancient past. Surprisingly, I'm in it. I found myself in Snap al-Tayyibin with my first BMW. I'm there in the corner, holding what looks like a mobile phone, but we did not have a mobile phone then. I was maybe reading a can of juice or something. This just tells you how old I am. And it sank to me that I am actually part of the older generation. But let me ask you a few questions. Who remembers the phone number of the house they grew up in? Well, I have quite a few hands up. Who remembers, this one is more difficult, huh? Who remembers the phone number of their spouse or mother or the closest relative? Okay, much less hands. I have to confess, I don't. But I used to remember between at least 20 to 30 names. And I also had a small booklet that I'd written, handwriting, that I kept in my pocket that hold all the essential numbers. Just like how dearly you keep your phone in your pocket every day and you just make sure that you have it, you don't leave home without it, that booklet was an essential. Okay, another test. Driving down the roads of maybe a familiar place like Riyadh or a foreign place. Who uses Google Maps? This is an easy one. Should be everyone, صح? Almost everyone. At our days, if it's a place we know, we use memory, actually. We know the streets, we know which traffic lights, and it's a place we don't know, we would rely on very precise instructions, like at the third dumpster, turn right, then look at the light pole that looks a bit weird, take a left, and then there's a house with a white door and a broken window, and that's the house next to our house. But you used to get there. Brain scientists say that over-relying on navigation aids like GPS actually diminishes the brain's natural capability to navigate. Did you know that? Us, the older generation, think that new technology, to a certain extent, is making us lose out. Whereas the newer generation says, yeah, well, who cares? I know how to get there. If I'm at shopping and I ask my son or daughter to add up the total just to see how expensive or how much is our shopping basket, they spring up their phone and they start calculating. Guys, hold on. It's just 2, 3 numbers. I could calculate in my head. But they don't. This definitely shows that there is a gap between generations. The older generation sees that the new generation, too technology-focused, glued to their phones, and not associated with the physical world. Whereas the newer generation looks at the older generation as very detached from technology, slow to learn, and going through extinction. This is definitely a gap. We hear the terms Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z. In Saudi Arabia, we have different names for them. We have Jil al-Tayyibin. Myself and I see some of my university colleagues here, some of Jil al-Tayyibin. Jil al-Tayyibin, we grew up influenced by mostly TV, cassette tapes. Our role models were the singers, sheikhs, or anybody who comes up on TV. And that was it for us. The millennials are جيل الألفية. These are the ones who grew up with home computing, PCs, and then the internet, and then the mobile phones. So these are the ones that became tech savvy and ruled the world. Then they had the next generation, which is, the name is the iPad generation. Whereas the first generation was like between the 60s to the 80s, the Alfiya generation was like between 80s to the mid-90s. This generation was the second half of the 90s for about 20 years, and that's the iPad generation. These are the most different and unique creatures, or human beings, because they grew up taking for granted that the world is technology, they're connected 100% of the time, and to them, a virtual world is almost like a natural world, where we, in the generation of Tayyibin, everything was physical. The word virtual was virtually not there. Everything had to be virtually present, let alone the metaverse. We're not there yet. These differences between the generations, which are natural, lead to stereotyping. The stereotype is just like I told you before. A stereotype is that the older generation is a bit less tech savvy. Another stereotype is the younger generation. It has less business experience. I would say that is fairly true. That stereotype, fairly true. Let's look at a video here. Let's watch a video together on the differences between generations. Can you please roll the video?
They fight for what side.
تربى هذا الجيل على التكنولوجيا، على التطور التقني.
عندنا خبرة فيها، والأجيال اللي قبلنا يحسوا يطالعوا فيها بشكل مختلف عننا، البرسبكتيف حقتهم غير البرسبكتيف حقتنا.
جيل التسعينات مكافح.
جاوب أنت أي جيل؟
زي ميلينيوم.
خلينا نرجع 40 سنة للوراء. قبل 40 سنة ما كان في الكمبيوترات، من أوائل من أدخل الكمبيوتر إلى السعودية يعني.
تتذكر عام كم دكتور؟
عام 80 أنا تخرجت من الجامعة عام 80. فكان نادر شيء اسمه كمبيوتر، فتحت محل كمبيوتر ولا أحد يبغى يشتري كمبيوتر.
الجيل اللي بعدك إيش حاب تقول؟
احمدوا ربكم.
This gap is confirmed. The stereotypes are there. We cannot deny them. So there's a gap, there's stereotypes. As again, they are okay. Then there is the next level, which is bias. What's the difference between stereotype? Stereotype is an opinion you hold. However, bias is something more dangerous. Bias is an emotion, is an intent, is negative, because whereas stereotype is a thought, an opinion, bias is acting or making decisions based on this bias. A bias, for example, is confirmation bias, where you only listen to people who think the way you think, or only take opinion that confirm the opinion you already had, that you shut out those who are opposed to you. Those are examples of biases. Why am I talking about bias, and why am I warning against bias? It is because we're in a transformation process right now. We're living a big transformation. We heard the speakers yesterday. Today we heard His Excellency Faisal Ibrahim. We heard His Excellency Yusuf Al-Muayyad from Bahrain, all speaking about transformation. Vision 2030 is a very big transformation. As we heard how difficult transformations are, a country transformation is even more difficult. If you want to transform a small country, a small company, and I have led some small companies trying to transform, like with 100 employees. It is an extremely difficult job. Now we have a country of 30 to 40 million that we want to transform. The only way to pull through a transformation is to bring everybody along. To bring everybody along, you need to be able to use the same terminology. You need to talk together. You need to think together. You don't need to have the same opinion, but at least you need to see eye to eye. And that's what we need to do. We need to overcome bias to succeed in implementing Vision 2030. I remember some time ago, when I was the younger generation joining a new company that had leaders and team members who've been with the company for decades. Some of them were there for quarter of a century. They had they had products or buildings in very nice parts of town. That's why they had a long waiting list to rent these properties. But the property level was not renovated for a very long time, was not that nice, in my opinion. Yet, they didn't want to touch them because they said, we have a long waiting list. I said, if you had a long waiting list, which means that you have demand, perhaps let's renovate them, make them more current, more updated, and you could charge even more for them. No, it will never work. This waiting list is there because the price is right. So why don't we try? You're wasting your time. Okay, let's try. So we renovated one. And it just went like that. Even though we charged double. Then we renovated 10. Same story held. Then we renovated them all. We still had a waiting list, even charging double. We just needed to experiment. And our competitors followed suit. The whole market changed. Inadvertently, in that situation, I used a leadership competency that we have developed here in the Misk Foundation as part of our Leadership 2030 Leadership Competency Model. We studied at the Misk Foundation how can we lead the transformation of the country and what skills, behaviors to embed within leaders of the future, the young leaders that you interact with, so that they could successfully lead Vision 2030. And we came up with our competency model that had 7 competencies. The competencies are being a progress driver, being a connector, being a strategy shaper, being a force of the future, being a constant learner, being a principled leader, and more importantly, being a people's leader. Well, we'll not have time to go through them all, and I invite you all to join our programs to embody those and learn more about them, or even download the document that we have on our website. But now I'll just go take you through an example of how to be a people leader, how to embody the competency of being a people leader. And the best way to do it is through an example. Being a people leader means that you have a set of behaviors, skills, and work styles that you could choose from. So you're not rigid. You have the flexibility to apply it according to the situation. The examples are, at the one extreme, you'll have the military leader, the senior military leader. This is somebody who's very rigid, very knowledgeable, does not communicate a lot, but gives orders, but knows what to do. Then you have the other extreme, is you and your colleagues going out for a desert outing, and you assign one of you to be the team leader. You make jokes on him or her, and he gives you some instructions, very open, communicative, asks your opinion, you could counter them, you have fun together. Which one would you choose if you're going into a war? Which kind of leader would you like? Which behavior would you want? Or you're under a big stress or disaster? Which one would you want if you are brainstorming a new idea? Probably the other side. You need to be able to take yourself off a set course of action or a set style and embody this flexibility that you could take from the old model or the newer model or the newer generation. If you embody these competencies, what happens is that you don't become part of Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, جيل الطيبين, الألفية, الiPad. You automatically become a member of the greatest generation. And what is the greatest generation? Generation transformation. And why is it great? Because you could be part of it regardless of your age. Even I myself can claim to be part of it. Give you some practical steps now. Because I want you all, I want us all, starting with this room here and the circle around us here, to be part of this generation. I want us to look around us here and look to somebody who's from a different generation than you are. I'll give you a minute to look at somebody who's from a different generation. You don't have to talk to them, so don't worry. Just look at somebody who's from a different generation. Okay? Now, close your eyes and imagine you being them. How did they grow up? Where did they come from? What experiences did they find? What technology shaped them? And how do they feel about the future? That's the simple exercise. Now I'm taking you through a more difficult exercise. And I promise you this will be the last one. Now, if you'd be kind enough to close your eyes again and imagine somebody else, somebody from a different generation, but somebody you care about. Either a parent, a child, a boss, a subordinate, somebody who you had a recent conflict with or a disagreement. Imagine this person, put this person in front of you. Now imagine yourself being them. And I'm closing your eyes to be with you there. How did they grow up? What shaped their opinion? What shaped their childhood? What technologies did they grow up? What influences did they have? Why are they asking you to do what they are? What are their aspirations for you and for the future? You can open your eyes now. I just want you to hold that thought with you. Hold that thought. The next time you encounter this person and you continue this conversation, please use what you thought of as a reference and see how things would be different. Thank you very much.